Good morning, everyone. We want to welcome you to our webinar workshop this Tuesday morning. We appreciate you waking up and spending just a small part of your day with us. My name is Brian Griffin, a marketing assistant here at Messer Financial Group. Many of you are already familiar with Messer Financial, but in case you don't know, we are an FMO located in Mint Hill, North Carolina. We started with just 2 agents, and we're now serving 20,000 plus agents across 40 states and still growing. So today we'll be learning how to build a house. Well, not actually a house, but the concept is going to be the same. You see, in order to build a house, the initial and most important part is a good solid foundation. So if the foundation is not solid, the home is not going to last. It won't be able to withstand the storms, the wind, the rain, even the basic elements that come against it. So sometimes if the foundation is found to be lacking, it has to be torn up and redone. Ken Smith is a master foundation builder when it comes to sales. He's going to tear up some of our foundations this morning. So your sales career, it has to be built to last any storms that come along. Ken has 40 years of insurance sales experience. He's the author of the best-selling book, Sales Lessons from the Masters. He's going to share several simple principles that can dramatically change the way you look at your business, and it will result in increased sales and increased income for you. So before we get started, a few housekeeping rules. We're going to hold all questions until the end of his presentation. If you do have questions, just type in the box on the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll get to as many as we can at the conclusion of the presentation. So now, without any further delay, Mr. Ken Smith.
Brian, thanks for that great introduction. As I was preparing this presentation, I started thinking about a good friend of mine who is an MGA up in Canada, which is the equivalent of an FMO. His organization is focused on life insurance. And one of the things is when they started, they were looking for ways to differentiate themselves from the other MGAs. And what they decided to do was add one element, and that's focus on sales training. And when he was getting ready to sell his MGA, he told me that when companies were coming in and talking with him, they found out that their average first-year commission was 13 times approximately the other MGAs. And the problem today is very few carriers and FMOs understand the difference that sales training can make for you. The reason I joined Messer Financial was Roy and Bill and the rest of the team understand what kind of a difference that can make for you. And what my purpose and my role here at Messer is really to help you become more successful. And I want to congratulate you this morning. I want to congratulate you on being in the top 10%. Now, this morning, you may not feel like you're in the top 10%, but just the fact that you showed up, you're here listening, tells me that you are a top 10%er. You know, Brian Tracy made the statement that selling is 80% mental and emotional and 20% technical. Now, I want you to stop and think about what you do in selling. The challenge we have is anyone who's sold understands the mental and emotional part of it. The challenge that we have in the industry is, in a lot of ways, we really have this flipped around. We focus 80% of our time on the technical part and only 20% on the mental and emotional. Now, I'm not saying the technical part isn't important, but we have to take that step back and think about the mental and emotional part of selling. Now, I believe that there's three things that it takes to succeed as a salesperson. One is understand the fundamental principles of sales. Second is know the precise steps for every sale. That is basically have a sales process. And the third is the desire to succeed. And I believe that if you understand the sales principles and have a sales process in place, number three will take care of itself. I have three expectations for this session this morning. First, I want you to come away with one idea that you can take and put to use immediately. You're investing an hour of your time with me. It's important to me that you take away something that you can use and you have a takeaway from this session. The second part is number two is I want you to come away with an understanding of sales principles and the importance of sales principles. And then third is understand the importance of having a sales process. Tony Robbins said, if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always gotten. And that quote reminds me of Einstein's definition of insanity. And that's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. There's something here I really believe, a lot of times we get into a rut, we keep doing the same thing over and over again and never growing. And one of the good things about there's some real positives in what we're going through now, and that's that it forces us to take that step back and look at what we're doing and ask the question, are we really doing the right thing? And I think one of the most important questions we can ask ourselves is, are we really taking the steps to grow our sales career? Because I believe that's so important, because if you're not growing, you're dying. So here's my question for you. And usually I love to ask this question when I'm in front of groups. What's the difference between plagiarism and research? The real definition is plagiarism is when you steal an idea and you don't give credit for it. Research is when you take ideas and you give credit to the source where you got the information. Now, I'm going to change all that. I am going to give you this morning the Ken Smith definition of plagiarism and research. Plagiarism is when you steal one idea. Research is when you steal a lot of ideas. And I will tell you, I am the master of research. I believe that life is too short to learn everything you need on your own. There's really two ways we learn. One is we make mistakes, we experience failure, and we learn from those mistakes. And that process can be brutal. The second way is to look at people who are doing what we want to do and copy what they're doing and learn from them. Ben Feldman was the greatest life insurance salesman ever. And he made the statement that only a fool learns from his experience. The wise man learns from the experience of others. And in my 40 years, I have found that every great salesman in this business has learned from other great salesmen. They've taken the ideas from the great salesmen and made them their own. What happened was, it's been almost 7 years ago. I had a year where I did probably 100 between webinars and in-person presentations. I did probably 100 meetings that year. And what I did differently was I went back to the early days of my sales career and said, okay, what really made a difference for me? And basically, I took those principles and started incorporating those into my presentation. And it was really amazing the response I got. The newer people in the business said, that stuff is great. We never heard that before. And the interesting reaction that I had was from, the veterans in this business that said, Ken, that works so well. I don't know why I stopped doing it. So the end result was, that year I had one week where I did 8 meetings, and it was really funny. Everyone after the meeting, I always had at least one person after the meeting come up and say, Ken, you really need to write a book. You really need to get these down in one place. And so the end result was my book, Sales Lessons from the Masters. And what I did was take the principles from four of the people that I consider to be my mentors in the business. I never met a single one of them in person, but I read and listened to everything they had and applied it. And I took the sales principles from them, and they're in the book. Now, I want to talk for a minute about sales principles. Sales principles are like the laws of nature. If it's a principle, it works 100% of the time. It's like if I'm standing on top of a building and I drop a ball, it's going to fall to the ground every single time. It's never going to go up. And so, like Newton's law of gravity, sales principles are the same thing. They work 100% of the time. Now, here's the interesting thing, is that the principles of both success and sales, they've been with us for thousands of years, and they haven't changed. The problem today is everyone is looking for fast answers. What's happened in the process is we become blinded to the old principles that work and always will work. And the bottom line is the principles are really simple, and success is about mastering those principles. One of the best examples to understand this concept of principles is Amazon. I've written a couple articles and did some research on Jeff Bezos and Amazon. And the amazing thing is, if you look at Amazon, Bezos took retailing principles from Gimbels, Macy, and Wanamaker, and then I'll include Sam Walton, and really, rather than brick and mortar, applied those same retailing principles online. If you look at the early days of Amazon, Bezos had everyone reading Sam Walton's book, Made in America, and he was actually of his early executives. They came from Walmart. So principles work 100% of the time. One of the things I was also thinking about was when I was in about 8th grade and talking with a basketball coach, and I asked him the key to winning, and what he told me is you make the layups. And I didn't catch on to that. It took me a long time to really think back and catch on to that. But what he was saying is that if you have the basic principles or fundamentals down, that's the key to winning. And so with whether it's basketball, whether it's retailing, whether it's sales, with what we do, the principles are really the key to being successful. I have 13 key principles that I work with, but I'm going to give you 4 today, and it's going to be on a very high level basis. But as time goes on and we're working together, I can share more. I'll share more with you. Principle number 1 is enthusiasm. Now, when I started in the insurance business, I was around people that talked about enthusiasm all the time. You never hear people talk about it today, but I believe it's one of the keys to becoming successful. And really not just in sales, but no matter in whatever you're doing. Frank Bettger is one of the people I write about in my book. Bettger was in the insurance business. He was failing miserably, and he turned his career around. His book, How I Raised Myself from Failure to Success in Selling, um, kept me in the insurance business the first year because he felt exactly what I was feeling and dealt with a lot of the same issues. But here's the amazing thing about his book, How I Raised Myself from Failure to Success in Selling. He wrote the book over 70 years ago. Now, if you go on Amazon and look at the comments, here's the book that was written 70 years ago. There are about 800 comments on Amazon. And so here's a book written 70 years ago that is still having an impact on salespeople today. But Bettger was a minor league baseball player. He made it to the major leagues for a while. But when he was in the minor leagues, he was fired from a team. And here's what happened. The manager thought he was lazy. And Bettger tried to talk with the manager and said, hey, all I'm doing is I'm nervous and I'm trying to hide my nervousness. The good news is Bettger got on with another team and he made up his mind that no one was going to ever call him lazy again. So he got on with a new team, went out there, it's like 95 degrees, the humidity is like 95%, and he threw himself into the game. And in fact, one of the newspapers called him Bettger, Pep Bettger, and they said, the team was on fire thanks to his influence. But here's the thing he found about when he acted enthusiastic. Number one, it overcame the fear and nervousness that he had. Second, it affected the other players. They became enthusiastic. And the third thing is he felt better after the game was over. So Bettger's in the insurance business. He is failing miserably. His manager called him in and said, Frank, you're not cut out to be a salesperson. He said, I'm cutting off your draw. You need to get out and look for another job. Bettger left there and he said, I knew I had a problem I had to deal with. And he heard about Dale Carnegie, and Dale Carnegie was holding a class in Philadelphia where he was that night. He went there, and that night, Carnegie was focused on enthusiasm. And what happened, and the importance of enthusiasm, and how you become enthusiastic. And so Bettger thought back to his days as a baseball player and recognized how that could help him in selling. He went into the office the next morning and he convinced the sales manager to give him another month. What happened was in the next 6 weeks, he sold more business than he had in the previous 10 months. And that was just applying the power of enthusiasm. William James was a Harvard professor, and he is considered the father of American psychology. He made an incredible discovery, and that's feelings follow actions, which is totally opposite to what a lot of us think from an intuitive standpoint. We think, oh, I'll do something when I feel like doing it. It doesn't work that way. I want you to think about this because we've all experienced that hesitation to make a call, to pick up the phone, to go to someone's house. But the question is, and especially with that call reluctance, what happens once you pick up the phone and take the action? You have a tremendous feeling and a feeling of excitement that goes along with it. What William James discovered was that if you want to be a certain way, all you have to do is act that way. So to be enthusiastic, all you need to do is to act enthusiastic. And here's my question for you. What happens to your prospect or your client when you're enthusiastic? Guess what? They become enthusiastic. The bottom line is, and it works several ways, but the bottom line is Human emotions are transferable. So when you're excited, and you don't have to be pounding a desk or anything like that, but when it comes through that you're excited about something, that transfers over to your prospect. And I'll tell you, it works the same way. We've got people out there that the only way they can brighten a room is by leaving. So here's a question for you. There's two guys in the guardhouse. The one guy says to the other guy, "What are you in for?" And the guy says, "I'm in for 30 days. I want AWOL." And that guy turns and asks the other guy, "Well, what are you in for?" He said, "I'm in for 3 days. I murdered a general." And he said, "Whoa." He said, "I get 30 days for going AWOL, and you only have 3 days for murdering the general." He said, "Yeah, they're going to hang me on Friday." I mean, that's a positive attitude. So principle number 2 is attitude. Now, W. Clement Stone, who I write about in the book, and what Stone did was he started combined insurance in 1920 with $100. By the late 1970s, combined insurance was $1 billion company. Now, Stone said something that I find really interesting. He said sales are contingent upon the attitude of the salesperson, not the prospect. So what I want to know is if you disagree, and we're going to put up a polling question. If you'll take a minute to complete the polling question. Okay, can we check on the results?
Okay, it's 100% yes.
Wow. Okay, Brian, thank you. This is a good group. I struggled with that for quite a while. And, reading Stone's books, he had two examples that really drove home the importance of attitude in selling. One example Stone talked about was, and this is the middle of the 1930s in the Depression, that his group was marketing a policy with commercial casualty, and the premium on it was higher than the policy they had been selling, and the benefits were also higher. But he said his salespeople wouldn't sell it. They said it's too expensive. So what Stone did was he took 4 weeks and went out and sold the policy himself. And once he sold it and they saw that it could be sold, then they started selling it. The second example is there was a guy starting in the insurance business, and the guy came to him, a new agent came to him and said, "Mr. Stone, can you give me the names of some people where I could use your name?" And Stone said, "No problem. You come in tomorrow morning. Back in those days, my secretary will have cards ready for you." So the guy came in and they gave him 10 cards. And he came back in the end of that week and said, "Mr. Stone, this is fantastic." He said, "Here's what happened." He said, "Of the 10, I sold 8 of them and have appointments with the other 2. And he said, "Can you give me some more names?" And Stone said to him, "I'm kind of busy right now. The phone book's over there." And he said, "All I did was take one from the A's, one from the B's, one from the C's." And the guy didn't believe him. Finally he believed him. And so he did the same thing the next couple days. And out of the next 10 calls he made, he got appointments with 2 and didn't get a sale. Here's the thing that is absolutely amazing is when he believed that he was calling on people that Stone had influence with, he was able to make the sale. Those people had no idea that who Stone was or anything like that. So yes, our sales are determined by our attitude. And here's the thing. your brain's like a computer. You put good stuff in, you get good stuff out. You put negative, you put bad stuff in, you're going to get bad stuff out. I share one example that I with an agent that I was working with a couple of years ago. He was 57 years old. He had been in the business for 10 years. He had a kind of a mediocre to fair year. We made one change with him, and that was when he was driving to appointments. He got him started listening to Earl Nightingale, to some real positive type input, and also listening to some great sales stuff while he was driving around. And that next year, he sold 3 times as much business as he had the previous year. And the only change we made with him was we worked to put good stuff into his brain, and get the bad stuff out. So my next question for you is, what was the principal form of transportation in the 1930s? It was passengers. And in the 1930s, most travel was done by railroad. Also, most freight was transported by railroad. So the question is, what happened to the railroad by the 1970s? If you go back to the early 1970s, most of the freight and most of the passenger railroads, a lot of them ended up in bankruptcy, and we ended up merging together. So what was the problem? The problem is they thought they were in the railroad business. They were so busy running a railroad that they forgot what they did was solve the problem of helping people and freight get from one place to another. So principle number 3 is, I want you to stop selling insurance. And you're saying, Ken, you're really crazy. You're really crazy. That's one of the reasons that I'm on this webinar, is I want to sell more insurance. Unless we want to end up like the bankrupt railroads of the 1970s, we need to stop selling insurance. I'm going to tell you this: no one wants to buy insurance, but what they want to do is solve a problem. There's a problem. How am I going to pay the out-of-pocket costs on my health insurance? Guess what? The insurance solves that problem. If I pass away, I want to make sure my family can stay in my home. How do we solve that problem? Life insurance. If I die, who's going to pay for my funeral and my final expenses? Guess what? That's a problem. Guess what? Life insurance solves that problem. So what we do, I want you to think in these terms. Forget about selling insurance and just think about what we do is we solve problems for our prospects. Last year, there were 20 million half-inch drill bits that were sold. My question for you is, how many of those people wanted to buy a drill bit? Not a single one. They had a problem, and that's the fact that they needed a half-inch hole. And the reason they bought the drill bit was to solve that problem. I'll tell everyone on this call, you can forget everything else about selling if you remember this, and that's that we solve problems. And I think this is one of the most important things, one of the most important principles from the standpoint of, once you can emotionally accept that we solve problems, this can change your whole attitude towards the business and towards what we do. So how do we help the prospect to see that they have a problem? I want you to think about that for a minute. And I'm going to talk about Socrates. Socrates was a great Greek philosopher. And I will tell you this, every great trial lawyer and every great salesman can thank Socrates. What Socrates found out was that if he disagreed with someone, if there was someone that disagreed with him, it didn't work to go and say, hey, you're wrong. What he found was that if you put together a list of questions and those questions helped that other person see the fallacy in their thought process, it would bring them around to Socrates' way of thinking. So the secret with this business is asking questions. And I'm going to give you an example that I've used for a long time with critical illness insurance. And follow along with me on this. Who do you know who's been diagnosed with cancer, had a heart attack or stroke? Everybody knows someone. Was it unexpected? Nobody expects to have cancer, heart attack, or stroke. Was there unplanned emotional or financial strain on the family or the business? 99.9% of the time, there's financial strain. 100% of the time, there is emotional stress. And then would cash have helped? Guess what? With those 4 questions, I just took someone through exactly the problem, the need and the problem that a critical illness plan solves. From a selling standpoint, I tell people all I do is ask questions, and in response to those questions, what I do is provide a solution. Here's the thing about questions. Questions let the other people know what you're thinking in a very subtle way. And the other thing that's powerful about questions is it complements the prospect by asking his or her opinion. What I found is that the top 3% of salespeople spend their time asking questions. I was thinking this morning about, I was on a program with another speaker 3-4 years ago, and he and I were having coffee, and he was telling me about this one company that he had done a speaking engagement with, and he said it was really amazing. He said their top salesperson wrote more business than the next 7 salespeople combined. And he said, I'm really a curious person, so I had to find this guy and have a chance to have coffee or a meal with him. And he said he sat down with the guy and he asked him, okay, why do you sell as much business as the next 7 salesmen? And the guy thought about it for a while and he said, I'm curious. I ask lots and lots of questions. And so questions make a difference. The top 3% of salespeople spend little time talking about product. What they do is they don't dig down into necessarily all the technical aspects of the product. What they focus on is how the product solves the problem. We have to recognize the fact that prospects are disorganized in thinking about insurance. And what happens is the questions, and if we ask the right questions in the right way, it really helps them organize their thinking and see the need. And one of the things this is so important, is when you're face to face with a prospect or talking to a prospect over the phone, they can ignore the answers, and that's what you're saying, but they can't ignore it when you're asking questions. And asking questions in an orderly manner really helps them to organize their thinking. And one of the most important things is understanding that a lot of times, and why questions are so important, is because they don't want to make a mistake. And if you ask the questions in the right order, um, you're taking them to the point where they see the problem, they see the solution, and they're confident with the product solving their problem. You know, I want to give you some examples of how questions are powerful. Obviously, some of you know how um, emotionally attached I am and to the importance of critical illness insurance. But this is one I used years back with working with agents in the health insurance market. You know, Before I ask this question, I'm asking about, if, with your out-of-pocket maximum, what do you think is most likely to happen? Do you think it could be an accident or a critical illness? And so I've gotten to this point. But my question to them then would be, if you reach that out-of-pocket maximum through an unforeseen accident or critical illness, would you cover that through your savings account, or would you want to see an option that would give you access up to 15,000 indirect payment to you? So basically I'm saying, hey, you have a problem here, and do you want to see an option that will pay 15,000 directly to you? With an MA plan, you know, my question would be, would you cover that out of pocket through your savings, or would you like to see an option that would give you access to whatever the benefit would be? With final expense, my question is, do you have set aside a dedicated set amount to take care of your funeral and final expenses? Are you aware that the average cost of a funeral is between 7,000 and 22,000? Do you want to make sure that the money's there for your burial? So, see, I'm not selling anything. All I'm doing is asking questions. Now, the questions are designed to lead the prospect to see that they have a problem and I have the solution for it. Frank Bettger, who I talked about, sold a $250,000 whole life sale in the middle to a manufacturer in the middle of the Depression. He got a lead from this manufacturer, was thinking about buying life insurance. First thing he did was he spent 2 hours sitting down and he put together a list of 14 questions. He goes to meet with the manufacturer the next day, and he walks in, greets the manufacturer. The manufacturer said, "Young man, I think you're wasting your time. I already have 8 other proposals. 2 of them are from good friends, and just give me the proposal and we'll make a decision next week." Bettger started asking his questions. By the time he got to the 8th of the 14th questions, they were on their way to have the manufacturer examined for the life insurance. They had completed the application already. So, what did Bettger do? Every single one of those other salespeople was selling insurance. Bettger, with taking the time to ask his questions, was showing that there was a problem. It needed to be solved immediately, and he had the solution. Bettger was solving problems while those other 8 were selling insurance. One of the other things that this makes me think about is there's a life insurance salesman in England by the name of Peter Rosengart. Peter Rosengart, for 20 years, had the Guinness Book of World Record for the largest life insurance sale. And here's what he did. It was a situation with MCA Records. They bought Geffen Records. and the price was like 300 million or 500 million, something like this. And Rosengard saw that, and he knew they were buying it. They had bought the company to get a hold of David Geffen. David Geffen was great on discovering talent. I mean, he had discovered, I think, Guns N' Roses. He worked with Cher, Elton John, all those. So they were buying David Geffen as much as they were the company. And what Rosengard did was, I mean, it's number one, he was persistent, but he was able to get to the on the phone with the president of MCA Records. And when he got on the phone there, he said to the president, he said, you know, congratulations, it's exciting that you were able to purchase Geffen Records. So let me ask you a question. You know, if David Geffen gets hit by a truck walking across the street, would that hurt the value of your acquisition? And he said, it was quiet for a while. Long pause, and the president came back and said, how much would $100 million of life insurance cost? And within the next 2 months, the board of directors approved a sale of a $100 million life insurance policy on David Geffen. So the questions make a difference. So I want to ask another polling question about sales process. So if you will take a minute and answer the questions.
So 30%, so do you have a scripted sales process? 30% say yes, 21% say yes, but I don't use it, 49% say no.
Perfect. Guess what? You're not too different than most salesmen. This study was done by a management consulting firm, and they interviewed salesmen across all industries. Here's the thing that really hit me. 36% of salespeople, say they have no sales process. 42% say they have a sales process, but they don't follow it. 78% do not have or use a sales process. Now, I want you to think about this. 20% of salespeople do 80% of the business. Does anyone see a correlation there? You know, I've done some writing about, I'm a big fan of Ray Kroc in McDonald's and how McDonald's was built. You know, it's interesting. McDonald's is a franchise, okay? And when you buy a franchise, what are you getting? You are getting a system or a process to follow. And if you follow that process, you make money. If you don't follow the process, you don't make money. The interesting thing is, in the early days of McDonald's, who do you think were the best franchisees? This may surprise you, but farmers. But if you stop and think about it, it makes so much sense, because, you know, farmers with farming were used to following a process. So when they sold the farm, moved to town, and ran a McDonald's, they were great at following Ray Kroc's process. The worst franchisees were MBAs, and Kroc hated MBAs because MBAs thought they could do it better, and they changed the process. So following a process is so important. Burger Chef. Now, I doubt there's going to be many on this call that even remember the name Burger Chef. at one time, up until about 1972, Burger Chef was a fast food restaurant, just like McDonald's. And up till 72, they had more locations than McDonald's. Burger Chef had a process that worked. Here's what happened. General Foods purchased Burger Chef, and they came in and changed the process. McDonald's passed Burger Chef. General Foods ended up selling Burger Chef. Eventually, they ended up merged into Hardee's, and there are no more Burger Chefs. But they had a process. They stopped following the process, and Burger Chef did not exist. So my thing is, how about if I could say you would increase your sales 133% in 10-month period? Would you get excited about that? This actually happened with one of my clients, and the only thing they did was we worked. They had a sales process. They were in the life insurance market. We put together a fact finder with scripted questions, and guess what? You know, they trained them. They practiced their sales presentation on me. But the bottom line is, in a 10-month period, they more than doubled their sales. I want to wrap this up, and then we'll look and see if you have any questions. One thing I want you to do at this point in time is, in the chat box, take a minute and put in there the one idea that you're taking away from this call. So take a minute now to do that. I want to share a story with you in closing. I am a big fan of the Sylvester Stallone and the Rocky series, but I don't know how many of you know the story behind it. Stallone wanted to be an actor, and the only jobs he could get were kind of as a thug, but he was persistent. Nothing was happening for him as an actor. One night, he's dead broke, but he's watching the fight between Chuck Wepner and Muhammad Ali. Now, Wepner was a club fighter. The Ali fight was probably the only fight that he had ever had the money to be able to train full time for. But he was known as the Bayoon Bleeder because he bled so easily. So he's in there with Ali. Ninth round, Ali's plummeting him, but ninth round, he knocks Ali down. He is within seconds of becoming the heavyweight champion of the world. Ali got up, and I think it finished with a TKO in the 15th round. But Stallone saw this, and he was really motivated. He stayed awake for the next 20 hours and wrote the script for Rocky. He started sending the script out, trying to sell it. People came back and said he got tons of rejections. Said it's too predictable, it's too sticky, kind of nowhere. Finally, he found two guys that were interested in it, and they came to him and said, "Hey, we'll give you $100,000 for the script." And he said, "Only if I'm Rocky." And they said, "No, you're a writer, you're not an actor." They came back, raised it to 125,000. They got up to 250,000, and finally, I think around $300,000. And Stallone said, "Only if I'm Rocky." So finally, what they ended up doing is, they said, "We'll give you 35,000 for the script. You're Rocky, and we'll give you points in the movie." And it's incredible. They made the movie for $1 million. You know, um, 6 months after the movie, it had grossed like $200 million. But here's the lesson that is so valuable: is Stallone was committed to being an actor, and you know even when he was dead broke and someone's offering him 125,000, he was so committed to his goal that he was willing to hang in there and stay focused on the objective. If we have half that commitment with what we do with our business, um, it's incredible. It's incredible what we can do. So, Brian, ready for some questions?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you so much for that. That was awesome. And we do have a few questions here. And I tell you what, the chat box is full of the one thing that these agents took away from your presentation today. So they got a lot out of it. So thank you so much for that.
Oh, you
Um,
are welcome.
Yes, sir. So let's see. We'll go get to the first question here. It says, "How can I find out the questions I need to ask and what order for the different insurance products I market?"
Okay, I am working on putting together final. I have one for final expense. I also have one for life insurance on the underage 65 market, and I'm working on other sales scripts. Um, at the end of this, there's a slide with my contact information. If you want to sit down and kind of work through it, I would be happy to take the time to do that with you. My email is ksmith@messerfinancial.com.
Excellent. Excellent. Now the next question, and just so you know, Ken, I have a lot of folks on here who are very familiar with you. So they they came back on excited just to hear you again. So the next question says, "Are you going to share the fact finder?" And I think he kind of touched on that a little bit.
I will be happy to share. I'll be happy to share the fact finder. Like I said, just email me. My contact information's up there on the screen now, and I will be glad to share that with you.
Okay, excellent. So i- now this question says, "I realize I've become a little jaded with the industry. What is the best way for me to change my attitude?"
There's a couple things. I think you really need to take the time and listen to some positive sales things about what kind of a difference that we make in with this industry. Um, if you'll email me and we can talk for a minute, I can suggest some specific things that I think might help.
Okay, very good. The next question, "Do you think objections are due to not asking enough questions?"
Many times they are, and usually when you're getting objections and you're getting them on a consistent basis, it's because something in your presentation isn't isn't answering that specific objection.
Okay, so essentially, objections are not. So as far as how do you view objections? Do you just view them as, because I know that a lot of salespeople view objections as a rejection.
Which
Um,
it's
Go
I
ahead.
I'm excited. I'm excited to get objections. Okay, because
Hmm.
when I get an objection, I know there's some interest in there. Now, there's usually something I didn't address, and when you get the objection, it's on me to figure out what I'm doing that that caused them to raise that objection. Does that
Sure.
make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the last question here, it says, "Are you a fan of word tracks?"
I am not familiar with word tracks at all.
Well, I think what they're talking about is basically memorizing
Oh, a
certain,
script.
Right.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I believe that scripts are the key to being successful in this industry. That falls in with the whole step-by-step sales process.
Okay, excellent. So once again, Ken, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your day and going through this information. I mean, once again, just having these principles available and understanding them and working them into the sales process, I believe is going to change a lot of people, a lot of our agents' careers. Before we wrap up here, is there anything else that you want to share in closing with those that are participating right now?
Yeah, couple things I really want to touch on. If you'd like to have another session with additional sales principles, send me an email and we'll look. I'll work with Brian and we'll work on scheduling another session. And then for the GAs that are working through Messer, if you'd like to have me do a specific webinar and specific training for your agents, I would love to do that. Email me, let me know. And same thing with individual agents. If you want to book a time so that we can talk, and I can work with you to help you, I am here as part of Messer to help you grow your business. That's my sole objective.
And we're definitely lucky to have you here. Once again, Ken, thank you so much for everything that you went through. Once again, I want to thank everyone for taking time out of your day. And hopefully, you learned something new that you'll be able to apply in your business immediately. If you are not contracted with Messer Financial, give us a call at 866-568-9649 and speak with one of our marketers, or email us at mfgmarketing@messerfinancial.com. If you do have any additional questions about contracting, please feel free to contact our producer support department at 866-568-9649 extension 7813. And once again, Ken has made himself available for any questions that you may have as far as your sales process is concerned. So any one of us will be happy to assist you in any way that we can. Also, take a minute to check out our events calendar at messerfinancial.com. We'll be having webinar workshops scheduled throughout the year with valuable information like you just received. And once again, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Take care of yourselves and everyone around you. Thank you.